We're delighted to have partnered with NordVPN again for this season. We partnered with them last year, and they are, of course, a supporter of Rangers FC as an official sponsor there. And best of all, we can give you an exclusive NordVPN deal. If you go to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, you will get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan and one additional month for free. Completely risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee with Nord. And look, I use this product. I would highly recommend it. I used to work in web, so I know how easy it is to steal people's data, especially if you're using a Wi-Fi system that is a shared one, or you're using 4 or 5G, then your details can be out there. With NordVPN, they're absolutely not. And there are other advantages to it as well. You can watch sporting events that maybe aren't being shown in your region. You can purchase flights from different virtual locations, and they do make your flights cheaper. This is very, very useful. What a price is in the UK isn't the same as what a price is in America or a price is on the continent. NordVPN can save you money. You can buy purchasing subscriptions from other countries at a cheaper price, and you protect your data while travelling and using public Wi-Fi. I keep coming back to that. Anyone who's at the hassle of a cancelled card will know what I'm talking about. So all you need to do is go to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, and you'll get a huge discount off your plan and 1 month additional free, completely risk-free. I urge you to do it. Hello everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar. I'm your host as always, and I'm joined this week by the Sage of Saltcoats, the man described on Twitter this week as like Santa Claus on crack. It's Andy McGowan.
Hello folks. If Santa Claus on Prozac, we are close. I was also described, and I quote, the biggest banger on Twitter, and then instantly blocked by somebody, so, you know, that's
I don't think you're the biggest banger on Twitter.
I'm a banger, you know what I mean?
And it's quite subjective, really, about banging size. But no, you're normally Mr. Positive, but I don't think that you're going to be today. And that's because after watching Rangers draw 1-1 at home to Livingston at the weekend, it was very difficult to be. Andy, I think the most frustrating thing as a football fan is, because I honestly don't believe most of us as football fans think that we are experts, right? I think that, you know, we all know a blowhard that did his coaching badge and thinks he knows better than everybody. But the vast majority of us, I think, accept that people who work within football know more about football than we do, understandably. Don't know how happy any of us would be if a footballer turned up at our work and told us how to do our jobs. And I think that most of us accept it. So the most depressing thing for me as a football fan is when you can see something is likely to happen and then it does. And that shakes your faith in the people who are making the decisions, because you think, well, if I can see this, why can't they? And that performance on Saturday, not simply the result was awful, but the performance, I think, was one of those days where Rangers resorted right from the start, and they kept it going pretty much the whole match, to lumping the ball into the box against a side that were deep and had plenty of guys, big guys, in the box, and of course created virtually nothing despite 80% possession. The crowd were expecting a reaction after watching a similarly impoverished attacking display against Dundee. Not only did we not get a reaction, if anything, it was worse. And I just thought Saturday, there's not coming back from this. You can make the logical arguments about, oh, well, you know, some results, it's only 4 points, blah, blah, all of that stuff. I just thought, the feeling in here today is he can't do this. And I think when you get to that stage, very rarely is there a way back from that.
I think you're right. I mean, I'm usually the last one to the table, and you know, in my logic, I'll say, well, that's because I give managers. I mean, do you remember I've done this with Senior? I give managers to the last kick of the ball until, you know, you reach the point where you're like, nah, this isn't going to change. And I think it's fair. I think it's balanced. I don't particularly like knee-jerk, you know, fan reaction, which is totally understandable, but I think sometimes we lose a bit of the nuance. We're not inside the club. We don't perhaps put into the equation the finances. There's loads of things, there's loads of variables that we don't always have the knowledge of before we jump to the conclusion to get rid of the manager. I think it's got to be, it's a big decision, especially at a club at Rangers. We don't change Rangers managers willy-nilly. And you've got to have somebody lined up and so on and so forth. But, up until maybe a couple of weeks ago, even after the Celtic game, even after the Liverpool game, I'm like, right, well, this is the guy that took us to a penalty kick of a Europa League Cup, and that can't just be dismissed. But, the eyes don't lie, Chico, as they say in Scarface. You're watching this, and even last week, that first half at Motherwell, David, it was abject. It was totally devoid of anything that you could actually point to and say, right, well, here's a glimmer of hope. And it was more of the same on Saturday. And it's today with everything. It's the selection, the use of squad, the tactics, absolutely everything is dysfunction. It appears. And when you get to that stage, you've got to then say, right, well, how do you turn this round? Yes, it can be turned round. And I think back to Gerrard at Tynecastle in the Scottish Cup. Who would have thought that after that we were going to have a team that went a season unbeaten? So it can be turned round, but the chances of this getting turned round now are diminishing to the point where it's almost non-existent, because, as you say, once the crowd make their mind up, it's very, very hard to get a collective that size back on board. You would really need to do things that you need to win at Napoli. You need to, have an unbeaten run until January and then beat Celtic. So it's not going to happen, David. The things we're watching here is dysfunction. I could go on, but I'll let you speak.
That looked a tired team at the weekend. I don't just mean physically. I think mentally it looked like a tired team at the weekend. And it's an old team. There's no getting away from that. We're going to come to Ross Wilson's part in this a little later, but there are a lot of guys in that team who, with no disrespect and who've been excellent servants for Rangers, are on the downward slide of their career. And they are struggling to be able to do it week in, week out, and to do it consistently. This Rangers team doesn't really play well across 90 minutes. There are games where we have good spells, but it very rarely is consistently on the boil for 90 minutes throughout games. And it certainly doesn't have good periods of performance. I was thinking about this today. Although there have been some very good results under Gio, and there have, and it would be unfair to say that there hadn't, there hasn't really been a sustained spell, Andy, where I've thought, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, we've been playing really well. I don't think that's happened yet. And I think that there's always the fear with this Rangers side that there's a game like Saturday in them. And that's because, with the exception of 1 year, for a lot of these players, it's true. That has been the case, that they do this. And there have been times where, when a few of them seem to lose form, it spread like a contagion. And when a few of them lose confidence, it spreads. And suddenly they're all like that. And they're not doing the basics right, which was the case at the weekend. David Martindale came into the press room afterwards and he was asked about his tactics. And the thing about David Martindale is I think maybe because of his background, he doesn't do some managers bristle when you ask them about tactics because they think, we're talking about why you asking me that, I'm a pro and you're not, you won't understand. He doesn't, he'll tell you. And he said, well, we knew we could deal with crosses into the box, so the plan was we would flood the centre and allow Rangers, the centre and a line across the back, and we would allow Rangers to have possession of the ball wide but deep where the fullbacks were. And they would have to put the ball in from there, and we were confident we'd be able to deal with them. Rangers put in 73 crosses at the weekend. Again, I go back to their manager could see this and had dealt. Everyone in the crowd after 10 minutes could see that. And people this is not hindsight. People near me at the stadium were saying, stop that. You're not going to get anything doing that, just lobbing the ball into the box. Their defenders are quite happy to eat that up. And yet, Rangers persisted with it. Now, I don't think Giovanni Van Bronckhorst said to them, right, lads, go out there and just aimlessly lump the ball into the box. So there's a disconnect there, Andy. There's something that isn't happening.
So we've completely abandoned trying to play through teams, and by that I mean at the edge of the box, things that we could do pretty well. We could mix it up, we could go wide, we had wide players, we had fullbacks, but we could also play through teams around and in the box. We're badly missing Joe Aribo in that regard, to the point where, as I say, we've abandoned it. We very rarely see any 1-2s that work or cut through at the edge of the box. The 73 crosses thing was apparent, it wasn't a surprise. I heard after the game that there were 73 crosses, it wasn't a surprise. But it's even the fact that a lot of the crosses, the shape on them is for, 15, 20 yards for the byline. So it's a specific type of cross. You're not getting defenders, it's bread and butter stuff. And it's probably in their favour. We're very rarely getting to the byline. Kent, who has come in for a lot of flack, I feel sorry for him because I don't think he's a problem. And basically, we are playing him like we used to play Brian Laudrup, which is, here's the ball, beat 5 players and create something. And he tried manfully on Saturday, and I mean, I watched the game back, and he did what he had today, and quite didn't come off for him. But Arfield on the right, I mean, I know if you ask Van Bronckhorst, he'll probably say something along the lines of he was there to go inside to create space up the wing for Tavernier, but Tavernier's struggling, we know that. We're all questioning whether he's got an injury that we don't know, or if he's playing through something that isn't in public domain. So it just beggars belief, particularly when we played against St Mirren with a wee bit of relative gay abandon, with the handbrake off, as everybody said, because we had Matondo and Sakala, didn't we? Mm-hmm. So what changes? You trying to tell me that the St Mirren formation is so wildly different and our personnel is so wildly different that we can't impose that same game plan that we had against St Mirren? Because I thought we had 90 minutes of decent play against St Mirren. It wasn't stellar, you know what I mean? But it was still, in the relative context of what we've been watching, it was an upgrade. So I couldn't get it. And to go back to your point there about, we've not had a settled period where we could put our hat on, us being in form, in inverted commas. What became a refreshing change, when Gerrard left, we kind of knew we were always going to be 4-3-3 or variations of that 4-3-3. And when Van Bronckhorst came in, we were all like, this is nice. We change from game to game. We use different tactics. But what that's become now is we have no patterns of play, because neither the formation, as far as I can see, or the personnel is the same 2 weeks in a row. And we don't have patterns of play. Under Bjorn Gerrard, the ball came out for a by kick, it went to Tavernier, it went diagonally into the middle of the park, and within 3-4 passes we were up the park. We have none of that now, except that horseshoe we were warned about. So it's accumulation of things. He's been unlucky with injuries, right? And sometimes you can't do anything about that, but he's not been unlucky at injuries to the point where we should be performing against the dross that we're facing. Livingston, no disrespect, Motherwell, even going back to Easter Road. I said at the time we were playing some kind of game of chess with a team that are worse, a worse Hibs team than was in the Championship. Why are we doing it? It's just going on too long, and it's not going to change, unfortunately, for me.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tavernier there. Now, he said at the weekend again that he's fine. The manager has said that there's no injury there. Well, there's something wrong, because this is not anywhere near the James Tavernier that we're used to. He's not able to get up and down the flank the way he normally does. And in fact, he's starting quite inside now to almost protect him from that. And he gets done, all ends up at the goal, and he can't get back. He can't get back to challenge for the ball, which then comes across. It should be dealt with. It isn't. If he's not injured, then he is woefully out of form. And I mean seriously badly out of form. And if he's not injured, is it more concerning? Does that mean that maybe he's just in that stage where after so many games over the years, players lose a wee half yard? Because an injury can get fixed. Wear and tear is more concerning.
It was due, because the guy's been a machine for us for a long, long time now, and whether it's injury or form or a mixture of both, it was in the post. It was going to happen at some point. We're going to talk about recruitment later on, so you've got to then turn around and say, right, well, why can we not afford to actually give this guy a rest against Livingston at home. So that goal just in the goal, I've got to say, right, I watched it a number of times because I thought, what happened there apart from Tavernier? But the ball gets kicked out for McGregor. That shouldn't cause a goal, but in itself is a problem because we started the season playing for the back and we wouldn't have done that at the start of the season. We've done it now. Arfield doesn't win the ball, doesn't do enough, doesn't get Tavernier a hand without the tackle or attempted tackle or whatever it was at the byline with Tav and Arfield is powder puff. Davies, split second the ball watching to give that guy the space, Newbley the space to get the ball and turn. It was a disastrous goal from start to finish, and to have it in the first couple of minutes, what was it, 3 minutes or something? It tells a story there. We should be setting the tone. That guy out in the touchline should be in the stand, from either Tav or from Arfield. It was a disastrous goal, and it just puts in the back foot. And I think the Tavernier thing, what really bugged me is I say Arfield's in that team ahead of him. So Arfield's never going to go by a man, right? We know that. We know the kind of player he is. He's a touch and go player. He'll lay it off and make a move. I know his best work is in and around the box. And he's good when you're playing defensively from the front three. If we're playing a team and we want to press, particularly in Europe, we've seen him utilised. So this is why I'm just saying, well, this doesn't make sense to me. Why are we not going for it here? So it's things like that, David, that are happening more often than not, where you're scratching your head. Use of personnel. Sakala's good enough to start against Liverpool at home. He's given them enough faith to do that. But then he brings on Matondo first over him the other day, on Saturday. It's things like this I just don't get. Scott Wright's flavoured a month and a half, 2 weeks, 2 months. Then he's out. What is going on? Is he placing too much emphasis on what's happening in training? Because, we're the best one in the world, training's training. It's things like this that are really, really baffling me, and he's not using the ingredients he has to make the best meal that he can, to use a management analogy. He's got all these players at his disposal. He's not finding anything that's melding together, no matter what he does. That then points to larger questions around, formation, tactics, system, and what the players are buying into.
On that, then, to extend the cooking metaphor, is he just chucking stuff against the wall and seeing what will stick? Because I think when you get rapid change arounds in areas where someone hasn't nailed a position, it's, well, I'll try that and see if this works.
I think that's right. I mean, we've seen it, the ultimate test of that in the last 10-15 minutes after the player gets sent off for Livingston. They threw everything at it and they were creaking, and probably if we'd had that for an extra 25 minutes, then we would have won the game just by sheer...
It's a pretty sad reflection on things.
I said he's been unlucky with injuries before, so Lawrence is a key injury, right? I really, really think that we have missed him tremendously. I think he was a gem. But by the same token, I've spoken on pods about Morelos and how badly he has let himself and his entire club down. But he's been back in inverted commas fit for a good wee while now, and we've still not been using him. And I know that Van Bronckhorst doesn't like two strikers, but I cannot think, to my untrained eye, that Morelos could not play a similar, if not identical, role to what Lawrence was playing, because he was the preferred number 10, it looked like. I don't think it's that far removed from what he was asked to do when we won 55. How often did we remark about him knitting the front four together because he was dropping deep? He's trying to tell me he can't take aspects of that and play in this team and do the same behind the Cholak. So we've now got a player that admittedly let us all down, right? But he's come back. We've got to get a tune on him because he's got even a year left, right? So he's got something to play for, whether it's for Rangers or for himself. We've got something to get out of him, and we've not found any notion of a formation that would bring the two together, even just to see what happens, right? If you're trying to tell me that Arfield at outside right against Livingston is feasible, but playing Morelos behind Cholak isn't, I'm going to say no. This just defies logic. Maybe I'm being over sentimental over Morelos and he's done, right? Maybe his motivation's gone. I don't know, but something has got to be done here that to spark in an attacking sense, because the elephant in the room is that Celtic are blown out of the way because of the way they play, right? And it's making it worse. It comes round to what we're watching, because we know that if we lose a goal are the chances of us scoring two? It's not always the case. It's not always the case you'd see that happen. So we need to see something that would spark some attacking flair or some goals beyond Cholak, because if we take Cholak out of this team this season, I don't know where we'd be in terms of the goal scoring and the ability to finish teams off.
When the football isn't good, and it's not, right, let's be totally honest here, Rangers don't play entertaining football. It's just a fact. Now, that's okay if you're winning, right? But then winning does become the only thing. That's all that matters. And you need to be top of the league. There were plenty of water teams that didn't play entertaining football. But they won things. And you knew they would, and you knew that when it mattered, they would show up and they would get the job done. Might not be pretty, but it didn't really matter. And that's not to say there wasn't moaning. You know, I think it's revisionist to say people didn't moan about the standard of football, even in that second spell where Walter was working miracles, because we're a demanding crowd and football fans do want to be entertained, but we want to win first and foremost. So you can be functional and a little bit dull so long as you are top of the league. And we're not. So then, well, what is there here to recommend us? Not a lot, unfortunately. And I think the sense of frustration around Ibrox, nobody was expecting a blow. Nobody was expecting us to go and win 5-0, which tells you something. Admittedly, Livingston usually do give both us and them a tough game. You know, they are well organised. They do work hard in their defensive. But the players that Rangers have should be more than capable of beating a Livingston team at home. It's just a fact, right? We should be able to create more and work them hard. You can't say their goalkeeper had a particularly difficult afternoon because he didn't. It's just a fact. Rangers were not making good chances. There was a lot of throwing their, the players throwing their hands up in the air at each other, complaining about passes not being made, moves not coming off, runs not being made, complaining to each other. One of the things in football, and again, as outsiders, we don't know. I haven't been in a professional dressing room as a player, so I don't know if this is the case. But we talk about players playing for a manager, and conversely, we talk about players not playing for a manager. And players will always tell you that's not the case. They will always tell you that doesn't happen. And then when they retire, they'll go, aye, sometimes it does happen. And an example we saw this weekend, Andy, was, of course, a case of a former Rangers manager, Steven Gerrard, whose team got cuffed to finish a terrible run for them away at Fulham, and then smashed Brentford 4-0, 3 up inside 15 minutes. So I don't believe that players I don't think they necessarily get together and say, we're not going to play and we're going to lose these matches. I don't think that happens. That's naive. But subconsciously, when you see a side playing with that sort of joie de vivre, you see a team playing with that energy. This Rangers team is not playing with any energy. They look frustrated. They look as though they're expecting setbacks to happen to them. And everything looks like a struggle at the moment. Everything looks like a chore for this Rangers team. There's nobody that you would say is Cholak was, but it seems to have slowed down very slightly recently. So that makes it very difficult then to get anything going. And we are about to talk about other reasons for this, and they are valid. I don't believe that there's ever just one person responsible. But the problem managers have in football is, as the most visible and as the easiest, if you like, to change, they will always be in the firing line. The old cliche, you can't sack 25 players, you can sack one manager. And that's what happens in football. We know this, increasingly so. So I just do not get the vibe at all from watching this Rangers team that there is an inherent core of belief in what they're being asked to do. And if there is, then they are doing it spectacularly badly.
I think, and it's too easy to read into things, right? But if you could go through that team, and first of all, it doesn't feel like there's buy-in to what's been projected from the touchline or in training. I don't think Gio's a particularly warm manager, right? I don't think he's got the same earthy commonality that you could get for Gerrard. If you look at what Gerrard used to do, you could see that players wanted to play from, apart from the fact that his stature went before him. Van Bronckhorst's had a better career than Gerrard, to be honest, but I don't think he's got that same warmth and ability to mix it up, to be the father figure and the disciplinarian. I think he's much more cold on that, but we don't know that, David, because we just see what we see, and you know better than most for the pressers that he's very, very well trained in terms of his public utterances. But what I was going to say is, if you go through that team and you look at most of the players, would they be sitting there saying, you've given me a fair crack, you look at McGregor, right? He's basically been brought back in for the Colt because, the Celtic debacle for McLaughlin. Tavernier could be playing through an injury, putting himself at risk, is what we presume, and he's the one that's getting put in front of the journalists to apologise every other week at this moment in time. There's other players that could go through. Sakala, basically was on the road out, and all of a sudden he's been asked to be the wing saviour. Kent's been flogged to death. He's getting loads and loads of flack and abuse from all angles, and to be honest, I feel he's been hung out to dry because of the way we play. I spoke about it earlier. The formation we play is basically you stand out there, we'll give you the ball and you beat the men that are doubling up on you. I think there's a lot of players in there that have got probably a reason, whether it's justified or no, as professional footballers, to feel a wee bit pissed off and to feel, I've been hung out to dry here. That's what I see, that's what I feel. Whether that's true or no, we don't really know. But I think sometimes when you get a cumulative effect of that, but it's more than a couple of players, it becomes the core of the squad. There's got to be some kind of sense of, what do I need to do to stay in the team, to get a run. So this is what's worrying me. I think players can down tools. I don't think they're not trying this, and it's two different things. I know it sounds like a contradiction, but I think they're trying their hardest, but if the belief isn't there in your heart of hearts, then it won't happen. You need to believe and try. That's the thing, because if you try and you believe, then usually you feel there's a reason for doing it. So I think there's problems there. I don't think it's unusual in a dressing room. I think it's pretty much, I'm not going to say he caused it. I think it's been circumstantial, but he hasn't helped. I think he hasn't helped. I'd have liked to have seen players stuck by and try and play into form. The only guy that's really done any run of form this season is Barisic, which is mind-boggling. You think to last season, we thought he'd be away in the summer. So I'm really worried about where we go from here in terms of the players' motivations, and the Gerrard Aston Villa thing that you speak of is a clear example of whatever's happened in that dressing room, whether it just becomes overbearing in terms of negativity and pressure, and Gerrard's the focus of that. Maybe we've got the starts of that in this, because we're now talking in terms of not just us as support, but the media is now talking about, when does this happen, because something's got to change. And, get Naples on Wednesday, that's not going to help.
No, that's not going to help matters at all. Look, here's the elephant in the room, if you like, Andy. I know you keep abreast of the finances more than most. Can Rangers afford to sack him and his team? Because it doesn't come cheap.
Well, I don't think it's budgeted for, put it that way. And you're talking millions. You're talking basically the money we took in for Gerrard, I think. Because you can't get rid of Van Bronckhorst and say to Dave Walsh, by the way, you stay, and say to Mackay, you stay. This really isn't how it works. You might see the new guy, Terry Bowley, he might hang about because he's got a slightly different role, and it's probably transferable to a new management team if it comes in, but you've got a massive outlay there for, and I don't know the details and length of contract, so I'm guessing here, but it's going to be in the millions of pounds, and it will be budgeted for. And I'm becoming persona non grata on Twitter because I'm the one that keeps saying, well, we're not getting as much money as we thought. Even I have realised that the Champions League money, just the way things have felt, hasn't been quite the panacea that I expected it to be. I've described it as rocket fuel. I still think it's better than, it's still the best thing that could have happened to us, qualifying for the Champions League. But I still think there's a lot of things around the club that are running hot. I refuse to listen to the kind of mantra that we need to stop talking about 2012 because we're still dealing with the echoes of 2012, right? So football-wise, yeah, I get it. We've moved well beyond that. But football-wise and finance-wise, for me, is inextricable. And I think we've still got some echoes of that. and I don't want to get into too detailed. I've done this in a finance pod, but you've got the roof. There's definitely still something there with the Ashley thing. We probably have to pay off. We're trying to create Edmondson House, which folk mock now because how many assists did Edmondson House get. That's not the point. It's going to give us £1 million a year, which is another good player per year in the future. So there's all these kind of things that are going on, and there's still the latter stages of the rebuild. But what I would get to here, David, is that what's getting me the unpopularity is I've said that the Rangers support are now inured to massive losses that have just been met by generous benefactors, directors. And the sugar daddy model, I think, is now in our DNA. And I think we're finding it really, really hard as a support to understand that what we make is what we're going to have to work with. And the days of fund money from, directors or investors or share issues is no longer the case. And I think the hard truth is that when they say that we're going to put every penny into the playing squad, and when I say they, I mean the board, that's the wage bill. Wage bill's too high. Wage bill, I'm pretty sure, and the accounts committee will be justified in saying that wage bill's too high. So all this kind of stuff and all the unrest we're feeling just now and seeing amongst the support, because I think it's just starting, I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet, is underpinned by a slight disconnect from what I see as reality in terms of finances. We're not going to spend our way out of this. We're not. And if you think there's going to be big money spent in January to rectify it, it's no. And even getting into next year, I think we might loosen the purse strings a wee bit, but it's not as simple as that. The world has changed, the game has changed, financial fair play, whatever it's called now, is going to be a problem for us. And we've got a couple of wee additional things that have just impinged us a bit too much. So it's there's a communication problem there. There's a perception thing that the club has to do something about. I don't know how.
It's that time of the show where I talk to you about balls, and not the round ones that our players are kicked towards the goal, but the two dangly ones that you keep in your trousers. Because if you are interested in having bald testicles, then there's only one place to go, and that's Manscaped.com. Manscaped are the market leaders for all of you disgusting people who like to walk about with no pubic hair. I think this is a modern affectation, but hey, they're not my nads. If you want to walk about with a couple of Phil Mitchells in your downstairs, that's quite all right by me. And I'll even help you with 20% off and free shipping if you go to manscaped.com. That's just enter the code Rangers. That's all you need to do. Go to manscaped.com, enter the code Rangers, and they will send you out this lovely package of stuff. And it is a lovely package of stuff, by the way, that you get from them. And it is tremendously effective at shaving body hair in general, because I've done my shoulders with it. Yes, I have hairy shoulders. I'm from Ayrshire. But you get loads of stuff with it as well. You get ball deodorant, you get spray, you get a t-shirt, and you get very comfortable boxer shorts. You can also go for their nose trimmer, which is excellent. And trust me, nobody likes hairy noses. I didn't think people liked hairless balls, but yet here we are. Manscaped.com, 20% off and free shipping. Use the code Rangers. Well, you mentioned there, Andy, the wage bill, and that does take us on neatly to the person whose job it is to oversee that, and that is Ross Wilson. And I think it's fair to say that he is under the microscope. It's a long-term bugbear of mine on here, listeners will know. I think the last few transfer windows have been very poor. I think the management of the squad, the existing players, has been poor. And I think that it's left us in a situation where next summer we are going to have to do, not through choice, but we're going to have to do one of those 10 in, 10 out, 20 player swings that we were told were a thing of the past, that we wouldn't have to do anymore, because we have allowed the midfield in particular to grow very old, and it hasn't been upgraded and it hasn't been fixed. We have allowed players to run down their contracts, and I get there might be the odd individual circumstance there. I get, COVID, the world's changed. I get all of that, but still, it has happened. So you have a situation where next summer, realistically, it's unlikely you're going to have McGregor, Jack, Davis and Arfield still around. Kamara he's desperate to get out. Everyone knows that. So Kamara will go. So that's a whole new midfield, needs to be put together. You have guys like Helander as well going out of contract, so that might not be a bad thing in terms of getting some money that isn't going onto the pitch, at least saved or can be reinvested. But there's going to have to be a radical change. Rangers don't really have any sellable assets at the moment because the last two, Kent and Morelos, are going to go out of contract. So, with the exception of Kamara, who's not worth anywhere near what we thought he was, I think it's fair to say. And obviously, as his contract runs further down, his value will lessen. And he's not playing at the moment either. He wasn't playing. I know he's been injured, but he wasn't playing before that. So I kind of look at what Ross Wilson is responsible for and say, none of this is working. I think his transfer track record is pretty poor overall. If you look at the two windows this summer, I think there were a couple of decent players brought in the summer. I really do. I think that Davis looks a good acquisition. I think Lawrence looks a good acquisition. Cholak looks a good acquisition. So, fair. But when I look at his overall record, January transfer window was howling. The one last summer was howling. The one before that didn't really do much either. I kind of look at this and I say, you've sort of coasted for 2 years and now all the chickens are going to come home to roost next summer. That's over and above the chickens already roosting on the pitch. But even just in terms of business next summer, this is a complete and utter failure, Andy.
Is that bait for me, Davey? You try to get me into trouble here?
No, look, that's what I think. Now, you might not, and that's the whole point of this site and this show. You are welcome. I will say what I think, and then one of the other podcasters who I trust and value their opinion will then say their opinion, and I will tell you why you're wrong. So, on you go.
So, Ross Wilson gets me in a bit of bother on Twitter because folk think I'm trying to be a smart arse. And I've basically said, folk don't understand what Ross Wilson's remit is. They don't know his job. And folk say, how dare you say that? But I don't think they understand that this is a layer above that. Now, I know the buck stops with him as much as it stops with Van Bronckhorst, and I'm not going to actually go into a defence of Ross Wilson per se, because one thing I don't do is I don't just die on the hill that I declare, because I can see cracks in my argument now. But the two guys that are responsible for the transfers before Wilson, Wilson is the guy that rubber stamps it, but there's a lot of stuff goes on before it gets to him. If you think it's the production line, there's a lot goes on before it gets to Ross Wilson. And Scold and another guy whose name escapes me have left the club. They're gone. And they would have been responsible for the windows that you speak of, Davey. And that doesn't mean it absolves Ross Wilson of blame, but the only thing I can liken to an industry is managing directors, and directors are a wee bit more operational as opposed to managing director who oversees everything. And I know that means the buck stops at a higher level, but the director of football, or whatever it's called now, it's a long-term thing, and I'm a wee bit, and this is the conservatism in me coming out, I'm a wee bit more likely to say no, you stick by the structure, the fundamentals. I've often said, David, and folk say to me, well, why do you think this? I've said the fundamentals of club are sound. And what I mean by that is the way we're going direction finance-wise, but also football development-wise. Despite what we're seeing just now, I still think the fundamentals are sound. Now, if you're Ross Wilson and you bring him into this conversation, he's going to say, oh, hold on a wee minute, right? We're now in a model operating where we need to generate our own funds, and he will turn around to you and say, I've just sold Bassey and Hearts into the best part of 25 million. Now, there'll be folk listening to this and they'll be rolling their eyes at me and saying, well, so what? We've not replaced them. Correct, but that's not the point I'm making. It's created a vast chunk, which is, a third of our annual turnover from the player trading model, which is obviously this fourth pillar that we spoke about. We're creating pathways for, King and Lowry, you speak of sellable assets, they too will be sellable assets within a year, I think. And I think that's proof positive of the football department doing something correct, whether that's getting the B team playing where they're playing or whatever. King and Lowry are shining lights of what our youth system can do. you might see next year that Colin McKinnon comes in. I don't know who's in the party, but that'll be the kind of plan that if he does what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, but these aren't extraordinary things. These are things that should be happening. What you're saying there, I think, is based on you're saying, well, we didn't do it for a while and now we're doing it, and it's a case of we're overpraising what should just be normality there.
But not every club can do it. So
a lot of clubs bring through players, Andy.
I know a lot of clubs bring through players, but not a lot of clubs bring through players with the expectation of winning the league and Champions League qualification.
But no one's asking them to bring through 11 youngsters and win the league. We're not doing that. But I think a youth system that gets as much spent on it as Rangers should be able to generate a first team player every couple of seasons. I really don't think that's unreasonable.
No, I don't think it's unreasonable as well. But we didn't do it before, so we're actually doing it now.
And I agree. But then, great. Well done, but there comes a point where, and I agree, see when Ross Wilson came in, there was a lot of stuff that had to be done in terms of building an apparatus. Yeah. But once that apparatus is built, it then has to run well, and it's not running well. And okay,
that's where your first team manager comes in.
Well, I agree with that, right? Who he appointed, by the way. But take that into account. Then let's go back to the squad management point. Then that is him. That's 100% him. They've kicked that midfield issue down the road for 5 transfer windows, and now it is glaring.
They've kicked that down the line, and this is where this went. The last window's chickens are coming home to roost, because we've spoke about a 50% hit rate being reasonable in the market we're operating. So for that, we had Davis, Lawrence, Cholak, Yilmaz, the jury's still out, and I think he'll be okay. But then Tillman's a big player for us, and he's no up to speed yet. He'll not be the only player that comes in of that nature where he doesn't get up to speed as quickly as we want. But I kind of saw the reason why we re-signed Davis in Arfield, because I thought, well, we're going to introduce a couple of young players this season, and we need a couple of old heads on the pitch and in the dressing room, and they'll not be playing every week. The problem we've got is that things have went so badly wrong on the part, we're turning to them to rely upon them. So there is... I'm not going to defend Wilson's transfer record this summer, but I mean, Ben Davis, we've hardly seen him. Yilmaz, I think it was to replace Barisic sooner rather than later, but Barisic has had a wee Indian summer. Atondo has been a major disappointment. I still think we can get something, but then that's just me being optimistic. Tillman for me is a player, but he's not quite hitting the heights of reliability of a number 10 for Rangers. And Lawrence and Cholak have been sensational, I thought, for the outlay. Suter was a gamble that went the way we thought it would go, but no, I don't think we can chastise the club too much for taking that point. So, Davey, a lot of what you're saying, I'm not going to sit here and take a total polar opposite attitude to it, but I do think that is... Much as what I've done with the manager, I think you've got to just temper it and balance it, because Wilson is the bigger picture guy. And yes, if it's no harm in the moment, it's like stock market. And I'm a born stock market guy. You'll have bad years, but if you've got 5 out of 6 that are good, then that's worth it. And sometimes that bad year is where you readjust to make sure the rest are correct. I still think that in time we'll be okay. I'd never ever think it's as bad as we think at this point in time. I still think if you change management and had a different approach, and just use some of that pragmatism we were talking about earlier on, I still think we could do something with the squad. I still think the squad is pretty capable. If we get some of the injured players back, Roof will make a difference. If we get Lawrence back after the new year, I think that'll make a tremendous difference. If we had Morelos up to speed, that would make a tremendous difference. So I still think that there's room for this Rangers team to actually deliver something.
Under this manager, though?
No, I don't think so.
Then we go back to the point we were making about are they playing for etc. etc.
No, I don't think. I think the time's gone. I think Van Bronckhorst's time's gone, and that's where it comes back to Ross Wilson, because continuity is the biggest part of his role. And if he's not got somebody or a selection of managers that are available, interested, and affordable to us, I'm not saying lined up. That would be fantastical, but he has to have a provision in place just now, because as you've said, as I've said, as the whole Rangers support have said, this looks as if it's heading for the rocks. We're pretty close to it. He is the one that actually has to find the solution. And that's kind of where I'm going with the longer term picture. I think you've got to stay the course with the fundamentals. You don't just say, oh, well, that didn't work, and then you start again. Because what do you do next? You just bring in another director of football that does more or less the same as what Wilson's got in the same market with the same money. I don't think that is the marginal gain that will make a difference here. I still believe Wilson is doing his job. As hard as that is for me to defend, because I see his role completely different, and I'm totally isolated, I admit, from your average bear just now. That's where I'm at.
Twitter's going to rip you apart.
I know Twitter. Listen, David, they're already ripping me apart because nobody wants to hear it. But changing the director of football isn't going to change anything very, very quickly. It basically what it's saying is, by the way, see that 5-year or whatever year plan it was that Wilson put in place, we've just abandoned it. And by the way,
maybe we've just completed it. He's been here a while, and maybe it is time for a bit of fresh blood. Maybe 4 years is the ultimate you get, or that's your shelf life now at a club like Rangers in the 21st century.
Has he been here 4 years?
It's not about the boss half, I don't think.
I think, listen, there'll come a time that I'll be proven wrong because everybody's got a shelf life, right? I just don't think that at this point in time, the board turning around and say, Wilson, you're failing dramatically, is on the cards, because they'll be looking at it with slightly different. I'm turning it a pure corporate wank here, KPIs, key performance indicators. There you go, David. I've just killed your podcast. We're talking about KPIs, the flagship.
I think KPIs, man. To me, they're a packet of dry roasted peanuts, man. But right, that's long term, and I'm sure that'll spark a lot of debate. But short term, I think we're all pretty much uniform on what our expectations are for Wednesday, and they are low. I was actually just totting up my bills because I'm travelling out to Naples for it, and I thought, I've just spent all this money to basically go and watch something I love be assaulted. Now,
well, you're arse because you're going to get stabbed in the arse by one of these pesky ruffians in the street.
No, I won't be. You know me, Andy. I like to get my money's worth out of a hotel room, so you know me. I'll be in there. But yeah, look, I don't. You know, and I know there are people that you should always go. Oh, you know, we could. You know, of course we can. And emotionally, I'll try my best for that. But realistically, you know, this team are literally in the best form they've ever been in. I mean, they equalled their club record at the weekend with 11 wins in a row. They've sailed through this group of death Champions League thing. They've absolutely annihilated the sides in it so far. Just great performance after great performance. They've got legit hopes of doing something really special this season. Yeah, you know, you can be optimistic. It's football, it's 11v11, yada yada. But realistically, it's more likely to be a very painful night than it is to be a celebratory one.
Nah, I fear the worst, and I just want it over with. If we could take this Champions League and just take the money and then say, by the way, we don't want to play the games, that would have been ideal for us this season. Napoli are, as you say, they could burn me a shout at actually winning the whole thing. So it's going to be a tough night for whatever team we put out. And ridiculous as it sounds, we've worked so hard and we've waited so long to get to this promised land of the Champions League. I think that's part of the problem this season. It's just been such an anticlimax in terms of, it's been chastening actually, in terms of where we are in the food chain. We just need to get through Wednesday, David, and minimise the damage as much as possible, and not let it affect, regardless of what happens, not let it affect the Aberdeen game, because at this moment in time that's probably more important, as perverse as that sounds. It's not where we want to be. We want to be competing. I think we're a good bit away from that, despite our heroics last year. I'm the same as you. I've lost £400 for British Airways for my flights to Naples, and I've never been so glad to lose £400 in my life, because I was shaming myself to go there, and then there was obviously the football was getting worse and worse as it came closer to the horizon. So, but there you go. That's my pessimistic take on it.
Yeah, I think I set out more in hope than expectation, right? And I'll leave it at that. But you're right. I mean, as strange as it might seem to non-Rangers fans, Aberdeen is a bigger game for us where we are right now than Napoli is. And as strange as it might seem to outsiders, every single Rangers fan, I think, will understand what that means. And probably agree with it. But those are the demands of where we are. Now, we'll be back next week, of course, on here, and we'll have a much better idea of where we are after these 2 matches, Andy. So I don't really want to get any speculating about what if this happens, what if that happens, because what will happen will obviously be what we're talking about. But it does seem to be lining up to be, one way or another, quite a pivotal week.
So we're talking about Aberdeen. Aberdeen game's bigger for Van Bronckhorst, I think if he gets through damage limitation in Napoli, I don't think it's realistic to use that against him unless, we get another absolute 7 or 8 nothing or whatever. But I don't know what the board are thinking. This is the other thing. The board must know what's happening here. Ross Wilson must know what's happening here. And if it's an unforeseen budgetary issue, they're going to have to swallow it, unfortunately, because ultimately the collective is responsible for this. But the appointment of Van Bronckhorst was universally lauded. I said at the time, privately to you guys, I said I'd have preferred to have Lampard. I just thought there was more continuity between Gerrard and Lampard and British style football and communication in the dressing room. But Van Bronckhorst was universally lauded, so we can't just say, it was a completely wrong decision. Everybody was saying, it's a good appointment.
Well, you can say we thought it was a good idea at the time, so did the board, but if it turns out not to be, you can say, but it wasn't. No, you are allowed to do that.
I know you're allowed to do that, but it's now. It's went badly wrong. 5 months ago, we wouldn't have been saying that. They've got to have provision for it, and I think the results, as ever, will dictate. We've got to this World Cup. This World Cup deadline's changing the dynamic of the season because it's given a hard stop. If we drop any more points, I think something will happen.
Yeah, I don't.
But David, what do you think about if you've not got somebody lined up? Is it worth it? Did you go back to the kind of Murray situation where you're in this today for a wee while?
Yeah, you absolutely prefer not to. But as you say that the World Cup does provide that, I just think the situation would be untenable if Rangers drop any more points. Go further behind before the World Cup, then the noise from the crowd will be far too much, and you will have to act whether you want to or not. It goes out the window. Villa didn't want to sack Steven Gerrard, for example. And they tried to give him as long as he could. But there comes a point where the crowd will force your hand, and we are very, very close. We're on the cusp of that. Right, folks, thank you very, very much for joining us here on Heart and Hand. As I say, we'll have full coverage on our Patreon from Naples. If you want to go and have a listen to that, it's patreon.com/Heart and Hand. Adam will be back with Heart and Hand Extra later in the week, which will go over whatever happens in Naples and look ahead to Saturday. And I'll be back here next Monday with the flagship show. So thanks to our executive producers in London, Mike Lee, Paul Miles, and thank you to Andy, because it's easy to come on here and froth at the mouth. It takes, it does. It takes more balls to come out and say stuff that people are going to disagree with you with. So that's one of the reasons I like having you on here, Andy. So well done, big you.
Good, thank you. Just go easy on me, folks. I am a human after all.
Barely, you work in finance. But anyway, even so. Right, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you this time next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.